everyone, and welcome to another Empower 2020 panel. I am Liz Prue, VP of Marketing at Base, and I'll be moderating today's session. I am so excited for a goal planning session with the Free Mamas founder and CEO, Lauren Golden. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you joining us. When I first came across you, I was like, number one, I have two kids under 3. I can't believe I haven't come across you before. Just perusing your website has saved my life. And I think an important thing I wanted to point out for everyone here too, even if you aren't a parent, this is still really beneficial. Lauren mainly focuses with mamas, which I'll let her describe here in a minute. But before we get started, stay on, even if you aren't a parent. I think you're going to find a lot of value from this session. But Lauren, I'll let you give a little background about yourself and the Free Mama movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So the short version is that I primarily work with moms, although we actually have a dad on calls with me, like in our community, in our coaching community. And it's awesome. And we have fur parents and grandparents, because the beautiful thing about working from home, and specifically I teach people how to freelance, so they're self-employed now working as independent contractors, is that the barrier for entry is so low. This is an exclusive opportunity for moms. This isn't exclusive for anybody. It's something that's very accessible to a lot of people. But being a mom of 3, my heart is with moms, and my journey to becoming a freelancer is a story that was written as a result of becoming a parent. So again, I'm the founder of the Free Mama, and I help moms ditch the 9-to-5 to work from home and live a totally awesome guilt-free life. I love how you polled your audience and everybody watching today about what you wanted to learn and what you want to talk about, and that so many people were like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, there's professional goals, but there's also personal goals, and how do I reconcile these? And for me, when I talk about what I do and I say, no, I help people live an awesome guilt-free life. Like, it is marrying those two together. Like, none of us are just any one thing, whether you're a parent or not. You're still a multifaceted individual. So I'm just super excited to dive into this topic. Like I said, I'm a mom of 3. Right now, I live in Katy, Texas, but we're actually getting ready to relocate here in a few weeks back to Kansas City. And I am just feeling very grateful for what I do. I started as a freelancer, and now that's what I teach other people how to do, is build online service-based businesses.
Awesome. I love it. That kind of kicks us off, your last point there on what goals look like, especially personal goals and professional development. So I wanted to start kind of addressing each of those and then talk about how you marry those together, so that way you're not overwhelmed with like 2 massive goal plans, or if that's not even what you do, that's what we'll dive into today.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about goal setting in your professional life. And I think what I love about your message is that it's not just about advancing in your role, but adjusting your role to what makes you happy. Yeah. I think a lot of times with goal setting, people think I have to set a goal for that next, like being a senior in whatever position I'm in, but even that's okay if that's not your goal, but it's also important to make sure that you're happy with what you're currently doing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and just how you approach professional development.
Yeah, so I'm you guys are going to hear a lot of concepts that I teach, and I talk about. A lot of these are in my book that you can kind of see here behind me. So I'm kind of a broken record on what I teach, but I teach it over and over again because it works. But we're all creatures of habit, right? So a lot of us are set in our ways, and you're probably listening to this today because you're like, what I'm doing may or may not be working, or what I've been doing has been working, and then 2020 happened, and like my life got flipped upside down, right? And like, just show of hands, like if that's you, solidarity. Like I said, we're moving, we started homeschooling our kids. Like, none of those are things that were even on the horizon for us a year ago. So there's 2 things I'd like to break down with this question. The first is, it's kind of short and sweet for me to introduce to you, but for you to do this work is going to feel challenging. And that's that you need to sit down, pen to paper, and I'm a virtual girl, like I work online, I love my cell phone, but you've got to take this one pen to paper, and you have to learn how to answer the question, what do I want? You know, there's a whole lot of status quo, community, society around us saying like, you should do this. And for a really long time, that's how I lived my life. You should get good grades. Cool. Got it. Got to work really hard, get really good grades. Okay, cool. You should get get a job. Okay, got it. Like I graduated from college and I got good grades and now I'm going to go get a job because that's what I should do, because that's the path that we're all supposed to be on in this world, right? We've all been programmed that way, and it's not bad. And for some people it's excellent. Turned out for me that didn't work for me, right? And then it's I should get married, and then it's well, I guess I'm married now, I should have kids, right? Like how
It's
many
like
of you
tunnel
ever,
vision. You get
it's total
stuck.
tunnel
Yeah.
vision, but we've been programmed that way. So I just want to tell you, like, that's not your fault. And if that kind of lifestyle, even if you're currently living it, it doesn't work for you, I want you to know that there are other ways. And that's a big part of my mission, is just to show people what's possible for them and taking control and taking ownership. So if you want to be in control of your life and your professional development and how much money you're going to make and what title you're going to have or what you're going to pursue or what achievements you're going to have throughout your career, you better start by sitting down and really going, what do I want? Like, without, you know, the society's expectations on me, or like, well, this is the path, this is the lean in, and this is the corporate ladder, or this is the, you know, this is the next step. Like, ditch all that, you guys. Like, if you, we're going to get into the personal side, but you will not be happy on the personal side if you're not creating something that will fulfill you professionally. You know, you can't separate those. I don't know a whole lot of people who hate their careers but love their lives. It's like, it's the opposite, right? It's like, well, I have a pretty good life, but I'm in this toxic work environment, or I hate my job, or whatever. And it starts to affect your other relationships. So that's the first thing, is you really got to sit and, like, you're not going to answer this in 30 seconds, most of you, but really sit and think about, like, what's my perfect day look like? What are the activities in my current job that I currently enjoy, if any? By the way, it's okay if you want to pivot. A lot of the women in my world who are learning to be virtual assistants or bookkeepers or copywriters, they had careers in nursing or education or something complete, or they've been staying at home for 2 decades, and it's still possible for you. But you've really got to kind of get inside yourself and go, what do I want? What do I want? And maybe why, right? Like, are you doing it to please your parent or your spouse, or is it really yours that you can own? So that's the first thing. The second thing we need to establish before we can even get into goal setting is a framework that I teach called wants, needs, haves. Okay. So, like, you might know what your dream life is. You might know exactly what you want. Like, if you were like, Lauren, come on, like, I'm here to set goals. I know what I want. That's awesome. And I believe that there's kind of this, like, well, there is definitely a hierarchy of needs, but even in our professional lives, we have to make sure that, like, the things we have to have are met before we pursue the things that we want. So, for example, I have to pay my mortgage. It's not really like, if I don't, there are negative consequences. I have to feed my children. I have to educate my children. And since I'm not taking them to school, now I literally have to educate my children, right? There's certain things we have to do. And then there's the things we need to do, right? I need to be a part of a group of women. I need community because I'm an extrovert and I'm very social, and I need that. I don't have to have it. I probably wouldn't die like the same way if I didn't have water, right? But I need that. It's the same way with your professional career. You have to make sure that your halves are met. Like, are you making that basic amount? So, you know, you were talking about skill sets, and, you know, maybe you want to learn a new thing, or maybe you do want to start your own freelancing business, or maybe you want to take that next step in your career at your job. But it's like, we have to start looking at things that this is kind of the anti-millennial framework, if you will. And I'm a millennial. So, like, if you're a millennial and you're watching, we were told we were special snowflakes and that we can do anything we want to do, and the sky's the limit. And here's the deal. I believe those things. Mm-hmm. And you have to earn it. Like, you're not just going to show up one day and get everything that you want. We got to secure the things that we have to have. If you want to have $1 million business, you have to have $1 million skill set. You have to have something that you have worked on and earned and developed. And maybe that means you've got to start at lower pricing, or right, and then work your way up. It's the same. It actually is similar to climbing the corporate ladder. It's not that you can't do it even as a solopreneur or an independent contractor. But so just learning this structure of, like, are my haves met? Cool. Are my needs met? Awesome. That's when you're poised to really go after the things that you want. But trying to jump from, like, I've got nothing and I can't pay my bills and I have no professional skills, to, well, I want to create a course for people on this software that I've never touched. We can't do it. Our brains aren't ready for it. So kind of following that sequence of events. But what's beautiful,
Mm.
at least for independent contractors or business owners, that is a little different from typical career paths, is that you can actually do this in a really short amount of time because you're in complete control of how long it takes you to learn and acquire these things.
I think all of those are such great points to remember, is that one, have expectations and know that you can't just jump in, or you may not be able to just jump in and do what you want to do. And then without the hard work, and
Yeah.
also understanding what that hard work looks like. That reminds me of something my husband always says when he left. He's a tech guy. He was working at Salesforce, left to do a startup. And I'm sure everyone's heard this before, where if it was that easy, everyone would do it. But he said, totally. And he said at the beginning, he's like, it's a mindset of someone's got to take the trash out. Like, he was like, I'm a founder of the business. Me and the CEO, we're taking the trash out every day. We're cleaning the office. Like, we're doing all these things. And that trickles into, like, doing the stuff that you didn't think you would have to do, but you need to do. And you're not going to get there unless you, have that acceptance that it's going to be really hard work. It's kind of like if you're an athlete, you're not going to be the best athlete if you don't practice and you don't put in the work.
Totally. And shout out to the, what was it called? The Michael Jordan documentary that's on Netflix right now. The whole team.
Yeah.
Team. The Last Dance.
Yeah.
Great recommendation. Like, if you want to be inspired to work hard, like, he didn't even make his high school team, y'all. Like, the first time, or his sophomore year or freshman year, or whatever.
He didn't
like,
make varsity.
Michael Jordan. Yeah. It's like, it's just, that is really inspiring. And it reminds me of what you're saying. And kudos to your husband, because if you're watching this, that means that you do have goals and you do have aspirations, and you probably want to be perceived as a leader. And so kudos to your husband. I always say, like, you can't ask other people to do something that you not only have you never done, but you're not willing to do yourself. Right. And to me, that really is true leadership, to this idea of, like, taking the trash out literally and figuratively, right? Yeah. It's like, you've got to earn it to an extent. Mm-hmm. And, it's not impossible. Like, I think one of the things that kind of clouds this for a lot of people, but I want to give you some perspective, is social media, right? It's really easy to look at someone who has the career you want to have or the business that you want to have and be like, well, of course they have it. Or, like, you know what I mean? They make it like whatever story you create in your head, but you have to remember, like, that person earned it. Like, they did something that got them to that point. And a lot of us have to, like, take a bite of humble pie and be like, you know what, have I put in that work? Like, have I had the failures and all of these things that a lot of us are so afraid of? We want it to be this perfect road to success. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it just does not work that way. And in fact, I would argue the failures that I've had within, both my career, but then also, this journey of entrepreneurship, that's where I learn the most. That's where I grow the most. And that has attributed the most to the success that I have today.
Totally. And this is something I have been hearing in a lot of our sessions for the summit, is this theme of forgiving yourself and allowing yourself to embrace failure. And on the other hand, allow yourself to be rewarded too. And especially in an assistant role, whether you're a virtual assistant or executive assistant or any admin professional, you're doing so many critical aspects of the business that if you move that fast, sometimes you forget to allow yourself to be rewarded, or allow yourself to think about where you can learn from a mistake. Yep. Or anything like that. And that's where you can not allow yourself to get stuck in hitting your goals, is to kind of take those step backs.
Yeah. And I would even take that one step further of, like, it's not even just giving yourself grace, but, like, what if you didn't need to, because you've reframed failure where you're actually grateful for it? Like, what if we reframed it that it's like, thank you, universe or God or whatever you believe, for this opportunity for me to learn and grow. And it goes back to, I don't know who originally said this, but it's this idea that, like, things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And then when it's you making mistakes, like you were just giving the advantage. I mean, I love screwing up, and I secretly, but not so secretly, love screwing up publicly, especially in front of my community, because so many of them are just paralyzed from taking action because of their fear of failure. I love to show them, look, hi, I run a multi-million dollar company and I just screwed up very publicly. I just sent an email to
And it's
like
okay.
100,000 people that was not supposed to go out. Like I'll jump on a Facebook Live and I'm like, look what I did. But the reason that I feel that way about it in front of my community is because number one, we need to learn that it's okay. Like everything's figure outable. But number two, when it comes to number one, I don't think making mistakes is failure. So again, we've got to reframe that. But what's awesome about making mistakes is you have the opportunity to own it. We're all human, we're all fallible, no one is perfect. And like you said, when you're a virtual assistant or executive assistant and you're responsible for a lot of things, you're carrying a lot of like throwing a lot of balls in there at the same time, and we're all human. So at some point in your career something will drop, but I think what really shows you who you are is what you do about it. Did you own it? Did you make it right? Like that's what people are going to remember, not the mistake that was made.
100%. And I think to recap the professional development tips, and we'll provide like a sheet for you guys after this too. That notion of taking control and ownership and really taking a look at the work you are doing and how you're performing with it can really help you shape out where you want to be so you can set those specific goals. So as we talk about personal goal setting, where do you like to start with that? And then how do you kind of mesh that with professional goals, or does it depend on what they are that they marry well together, or what does that look like?
Yeah, what a great question. And I'd love to share my screen here in a second, but
Yeah.
I'll set the stage first so that I don't get everybody distracted. And I don't have like fancy PowerPoints. I need one of you to come do that for me, apparently. But I do have these beautiful graphics that my designer made that we use for a challenge inside of our community. So I did this challenge back in August, and we've done it a couple times before. We'll probably do it just like, just for fun, because everybody's constantly thinking about goals. And well, I'll go ahead and share my screen because I think it'll make more sense. How's that?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so again, this is not fancy. We've got a couple things going on here, so try not to get distracted. But where I'm looking is up here at the top. Do you see this timeline?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we're actually going to start over here. So the first thing I do when I do this challenge is I actually give some stories and some examples about things I've wanted to do in my life, and how I'll give one for example. So my husband and I, we've been married 11 years. We've known each other for 13. And since we've been dating, we have talked about taking this RV trip, like when we retire. Like that was our retirement plan. It's like, we're going to kick the kids out of the house. Like, hopefully they'll all be gone already on their own as adults. And then like, we're just going to sell our house and we're just going to like travel the country. Like this was the dream. Right. And then a couple years ago, as my husband and I have evolved as professionally and personally, and just really gotten into goal setting and being intentional with how we live our lives, it was last summer that we actually started talking about this seriously. And we're like, why would we wait to experience this country and not take our children with us? Like that just, it was kind of like, what if this wasn't some far off, elusive thing that we may or may not do in the future, but what if this was something that could actually happen for us? And so what happens is when you start talking about your dreams and all these things that you want, remember the first step is you have to sit down and go, what do I actually want? And when you start looking at those things through the lens of like, this is possible, this is going to happen, your actions start to change. So it was last summer, my husband and I had this conversation. We're like, what if we did this before our kids were grown-ups and had their own families? Like, what if this actually happened? The next thing we did was we found ourselves using our date nights, like getting a babysitter for the kids. And we would like go to RV dealerships and just look and be like, what do they have? Like, what are the different kinds? And then all of a sudden we were like, what if we did this like next summer? Like, what would that look like? Like, what would we have to do? What would my husband have to do with his job? What would I have to do within my business? What preparations would need to be made? My kids are off school. And in December of last year, we actually committed to do it. Like we told people, right? Like we committed out
You're
loud.
committed. You told people.
Yeah, to be held accountable, right?
Yeah,
It was,
yeah.
hey guys, we're like gonna buy an RV and travel around the country. And everyone was like, you're gonna what? So then, and this is important that you understand this part about goals, is that if you keep your goals private, you are quite statistically less likely to achieve them. And so it was an intentional step in our journey that we decided to tell people what our goals were and what our plans were. So then it got serious, right? It's like, okay, well, if we're going on this RV trip, we need to decide, are we renting or are we buying? And we did all this research and we mapped out the country and we did all these things, and we actually purchased an RV like 2 weeks before the global pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
Because of, like, obviously not knowing it was going to happen, and we
Right.
almost didn't go because we're, you know, is it safe, is it like, is this irresponsible? But most of the places we were going were like national parks and state parks and like very like easy to social distance outside type of places. And so we did decide to go. But the point I want to show you, and that you can see on here, and what I try to get people to understand, is that whatever these ideas you have about your dream life, I want people to agree that if you were intentional, if you had people holding you accountable, if you had the steps to take and the roadmap to get there, can we all agree that you could actually be living your dream life within the next 5 years? And 99% of the time, I can get people to actually see that for themselves. Whatever it is you wrote down, whatever it is you want, whatever your dream life looks like, if you were focused specifically on those goals and that vision, could you do that in the next 5 years? And almost every time I can get people on board with that. So coming back over to this image, I start this is something I do regularly. I check in with, but your 5-year goals, and they might evolve. Like now that we've gone on this RV trip, like it's like, what else can we do? Like, what if we went on a cruise around the world? Like, what would that look like? You know, let yourself go wild, like let yourself really dream. But then by the time we tone this dream life down into these 5-year goals, you have to practice SMART goals. Now, this is not my concept. Most of you are probably familiar with the idea of SMART goals, and yet most of you probably aren't actually applying it, right? So it's like, I want to get a promotion, or I want to be earning twice as much, or whatever. Like, that's all fine, but you have to follow the whole structure. It has to be specific. It has to be measurable. It has to be associated with time. Those are like probably the biggest ones. Otherwise, you have no way to hold yourself accountable. It's still just a dream. It's just a wish. It's something you're hoping for. A goal should be measurable. At the end of the day, you should be able to go, I hit my goal. I did not hit my goal. And the I did not hit my goal should not be wrapped in shame. Okay. You have to learn to become objective with your accomplishments so that it's more like collecting data, right? It's like, okay, well, that didn't work, or, you know, I really didn't follow through with what I said I was going to do, or whatever the thing was that is why you didn't reach your goal. You know, again, it's that ownership. If you want control over your life, you have to own your actions or lack thereof. So then, and to marry this together, I'm doing this with every aspect of my life. These are professional goals. These are personal goals. In the next 5 years, and this isn't a SMART goal, but just going off the top of my head, like I want to feel comfortable in a 2-piece swimsuit on the beach. That might be something for you. Or I want to be, not eating any more processed foods and sugar in the next 5 years, because it would take me 5 years to curb all sugar.
I'm like, that's a long time.
I want to live in this house, in this town, whatever these things are. So this is where we combine it, okay, is at this big level. Then we're going to look at what are my 5-year goals, what are my dream life, and how can I backtrack that to go, cool, if 5 years from now, I want to be making $250,000 a year in my own business, but today I don't even have my own business, what's a realistic place for me to be 1 year from now? Well, maybe your 1-year goal is to make $40,000 a year as a freelancer. That'd be a really great first step, right? And it's measurable. You've got 12 months, $40,000. You might want to plug in some things about specifically how are you going to do that? Well, I need to make this much a month. This is the service I provide. You start to fill in the gaps, right? Or 5-year goal. Okay, well, if it's health, like I want to feel comfortable in a swimsuit, you'd have to ask yourself, what would make me feel comfortable in a 2-piece swimsuit? Is that, toning? Is that mindset? Like, do I need to change my relationship with my body? What are the things that I need to do in this next year so that 5 years from now, this thing is possible for me? And again, your 1-year goals should be SMART goals. And everything you put here, I would break out into an actionable 1-year goal as well. Okay. Now you're going to notice the biggest shift here. This says 90-day goal singular. This is why I believe I've achieved so much in the last few years, is because I break all my big 1 year SMART goals down into quarters. And I only focus on one thing at a time. This is how in 1 year I was able to grow a Facebook group of like 20,000 women. I was able to write a best-selling book. I launched a course. I made $600,000 my first year in business because I did one thing at a time. And the key with your 90-day, so again, just to reiterate, your 90-day goal should be broken out of one of your 1 year goals. But it's like a quarter sprint. And if you hit your goal early, great, move on. If you don't, here's what you're looking for. Here's like the key you need to pay attention to for your 90-day goals. You are looking either to achieve it or sustain it. So if it's a financial goal, and let's go back to that, your 1 year goal is to make $40,000 your first year as a freelancer, right? So maybe your 90-day goal would be, to get your first 3 paying clients and to get 2 out of the 3 clients on a, $1,000 a month retainer or something like that, right? So it's recurring income. It's coming in and this is all off the top of my head. So if the math is bad, I apologize. But that would be your 90-day goal, right? So like by the end, let's say by the end of 60 days, you've gotten 4 clients and 2 of them are on 1 month retainers. Cool. I'd move on to your next 90-day goal. Like you've either hit it or you've sustained it. It's sustainable. They're on a contract. They're on a retainer, right? Or let's say your 90-day goal is more related to weight again, right? And it's like, your goal is to lose 2 pounds a week or 1 pound a week or whatever. I'm so not a health coach, but something that is safe and being managed with someone who is qualified to assist you with your health goals. And again, your goal is to achieve it or sustain it. And that's when you can really move on. What if it takes you 120 days to hit that goal? Cool, that's fine, great. But the biggest key that I've got to tell you, Liz, that to me makes the biggest difference between people who I see are successful and not as successful as quickly is they're trying to do too much at once. And our brains literally can't handle that. You can't make over you can't improve your marriage, stop yelling at your children, lose 40 pounds, go vegan, and start a business in the same month. You're going to implode, and then your confidence shrinks because you set yourself up to fail. And so the biggest thing is, you've got your 1 year SMART goals now, and break it down into these quarter sprints where you're focusing on one major shift at a time until you've achieved it or sustained it. And then just really quickly to finish up, your 90-day goal, you want to backtrack into your monthly goal so that you can start to break down, cool, what does my to-do list look like? Like, what is this? Like, I get my 90-day goal, but what do I do on Tuesday? Like, that's got to, this is where a lot of people get overwhelmed, right? And so you're going to break your 90-day down to a monthly goal, which if it is a numbers related goal, oftentimes you can divide by 3. And then I am a massive fan of time blocking. I use Google Calendar. I have it color coordinated, and I only use one calendar, and I have my family stuff in a certain color and my personal stuff in another, and my meetings in one color, and then my personal business work time in a different color, so I can see my whole life all at once. And then I'm sure we'll probably get into this more in just a second, but to figure out what I do on a daily basis, I use something that I teach called the Daily 5.
It's I love all of that, and everyone, I was taking notes for everybody on quick hits, so we can give you like a quick sheet on this too, but I definitely want to share that slide you put up as well. I think I love that you dove into how to actually break it down, because I think a lot of what we were initially saying up here, it's like, yeah, we all know we need to be doing this, but personally for me, like, how? Yeah, it's like I get crippled by indecision or what I need to do. And I think it's so important to remember, like, okay, you have that goal. Now break it down to your 90 days. Those 90-day goal, break that down to your monthly goal. And then you can really start looking at your day-to-day. And what we're about to dive into is how you make goal setting a part of your everyday life.
Yeah.
And I think, quick example, like we are trying to use less plastic in our house, which we have 2 dogs and 2 toddlers. I recognize that's impossible, but I'm trying to be
Nothing's impossible.
Nothing's impossible. Well, during quarantine, it was impossible. Now that we're getting into a little bit of a rhythm, I'm like, okay. But in looking at, your method and what you recommend people do, I'm like, okay, what can I realistically do this week to be successful? And there's one thing that I always try and look at whenever we're purchasing kitchenware or something, I will do like that extra 30-second research to see, okay, is this like a single-use plastic, or is this something that's sustainable? And then you feel, it's so silly how good I feel when I buy something like that. Then I'm like, oh, that's moving towards our goal of getting rid of single-use plastic in our house.
Yep.
As one of our personal goals.
That's a great example. And I think, again, this is why so many people get defeated about being able to make an impact personally or professionally. And I can actually really empathize with your example. Like, that's something I care about too, but it's like, I felt like a lot of us are wired that it's like all or nothing, right? And it's like, well, if I can't overhaul my entire house, then why bother? Like, I'm a failure. I can't figure this out. And it's the same with goals, right? It's like, well, I want this thing, but it feels so big. It feels so hard and far away. This 5-year goal, these things that I want, that like, they seem so big because I can't, what do I do on Tuesday? Like, that's where our minds are, especially during this pandemic. And especially if you have children, it's like, we can barely see, the tip of our nose. So like, for me, it's the same with goals as it is with what I've done with this topic you just brought up. It's like, what's one thing that I can do that I can make a swap that doesn't make me go crazy and I don't have to relearn how to use my house or live my life, and for me, it was straws. That was like the first thing for me that I felt like I could do something different. We're already pretty like, this is my coffee. This is my iced coffee. So, I'm not going to, and so we do pretty good with cups. And it was like, I did straws. And then it was like we use a lot of,
Right, cut out just for, it was only like 4 seconds. You're good now.
Perfect.
Okay.
And so like the next thing that I'm like, how do we tackle this? I'm like feeling very drawn to our paper towel situation. I'm like, I have 3 small kids. I'm like, we use a lot of paper towels. And so like finding, those microfiber type thing, what can we use to clean? Maybe I still need to hose off my children and they're not ready for cloth napkins yet, but and it's the same with your goals. And so what I teach, and I always sound very funny when I say this, it brings a lot of awareness at my lack of enunciation. Success, everybody repeat this with me after I say it. Success comes from many wins. Many wins. I feel like when I say that, no one can understand me, but hopefully you all got that. That's how I wrote a book. That's how I built this course. That's how I do things. It's from having a lot of successful hour time blocks, not from having like a month where my kids are perfect and my husband understands that I'm working and everything's fun. No, it's many wins is what brings you to success. And so just to kind of tell everybody what my daily 5 is, to answer your question about like, how do I bring this down? We know what we want. We turn it into 5-year SMART goals. We break it down into 1 year, 9-month goal. Focus being the key word there. If you're not focused on achieving one major thing, your attention's divided. And I always like to give credit where credit's due. My friend Dan Henry, he's an internet marketer. He like will draw this picture on a piece of paper and of a pizza, right? He'll just draw a circle and he'll be like, okay, this is your brain, right? Now, if you're trying to learn Facebook ads, but you're also trying to, learn this, and then you also have this goal to do this, and every time he gives an example, he's like drawing a line through the pizza. And he's like, now each of these things you want to do is this thin, really little thin slice of pizza. Like, that's not going to help you achieve your big goal. And so it's like, how can we leave this pizza pie as whole as possible? Knowing, I am a wife and a mom, like, of course my brain is divided, but when it comes to my goals, as whole as I can leave it, that's how much of me and how much energy and focus I'm going to be pouring into that one thing. And so when we try to do too many things at once, your pizza's too thin. Like, you're never going to get full. You'll never get there. Okay. So then we go to our monthly goal. We divide our 90-day, our one goal. We focus on 1 month at a time because Google Calendar will present your month beautifully that way. Then we break it into weekly time blocking. If you guys aren't time blocking, I mean, I'm sure you all may talk about it. I also have resources on time blocking, but it is fantastic. And the daily 5 is a tool that I developed where it's kind of this idea that less is more and learning to prioritize. It's not about getting a million things done in an individual day. We can't. We all overestimate what we can get done in a day, and we underestimate what we can achieve in a year. So the way the daily 5 works is that I believe you should have no more than 5 things that you're focusing on in a day, and you rank them. So you rank them in order of importance, in order of what's going to shift the needle forward in terms, because again, your daily 5 should be in alignment with these goals that you set for yourself based on your dream life 5 years from now, right?
Mhm.
And the way to best utilize the daily 5 is it's not about getting all 5 things done. It's about starting with that first thing that you have said and committed to being the most important thing on your list to do that day. A lot of us procrastinate, whether we think we do or not. Sometimes it's for a lot of different reasons, but in my particular world where I'm teaching people to be self-employed, it's primarily because of fear. It feels hard or it feels scary. I have to put myself out there. I have to do a Facebook Live. I have to send a proposal. I have to raise my rates. I have to let this client go. I have like all of these things that can feel that I have to ask for a raise. I have to, apply for that higher position. I don't want to only talk to self-employed people. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. We're very easy at procrastinating the things that pull us out of our comfort zone. But I'll share my screen just one more quick time. You probably saw over here, here's you. You're fine. You're not miserable. There's no tear or anything, but you're not smiling like my friend down here. Mm-hmm. The only way to achieve your dreams, you've got to cross over that line of your comfort zone. And the thing that prevents a lot of us from doing that is our limiting beliefs. So we have fears that are holding us back from getting outside of our comfort zone. But the secret sauce is that everything you put in that dream life, everything you said you wanted, it's on the other side of your comfort zone, or you would already have achieved it. We wouldn't be having this conversation today.
I love that. I think that is so valuable and helpful. It reminds me of something that one of our panelists, Debbie Gross, had said, is that she looks at experimenting is kind of one of those things where outside of your comfort zone, you look at, okay, I need to experiment more with X, X, and X. And that comes naturally for most people with like a connotation of fear. Like, well, if I'm experimenting, that's an unknown. And she said, I look at it as exploring. And when I approach it in that way, I almost take a different mindset and I'm going into it a little bit more confident. And I think you elaborated on that perfectly. I love it.
Yeah, we have to use like a scientist hat, which should, in a healthy way, suppress our emotions.
Yeah.
Most of us go into these hard, challenging situations or just newness, right? Mm-hmm. And we are bringing our emotions. And so when a client rejects us, or we don't get the project, or we don't get the raise or the job or whatever, we start going into what's wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I failed. All of these whereas it's like, how can we look at this more objectively with the research, with the science, with the it's testing, right? Wow, that approach didn't work, or that proposal wasn't effective, or maybe this was not a client I actually wanted to work with, or a project that I actually wanted to do. But we've got to like put the scientist hat on, because nothing you're going to go through in your life related to business, at the very least, is a reflection on you or your worth as a human being, or your potential capabilities in the future. It's just not. It's just a thing that happened in that moment, right? And you've got to look at it a little more objectively.
So as we are coming up on the last part of our panel here, we have a few minutes left, and I would love to hear if there are any recommendations for checking in on yourself. Things like, do you write in a notebook? Is that part of your time block? Just a gut check, because we are moving so fast. So what can people start doing today just to make sure that they're holding themselves accountable?
Yeah, so I will never ever teach you or tell someone to do something that I don't do regularly. So I have a lot of resistance to journaling and meditation. I have been, you guys, trust me, I know it's good for you. I've been told, I've got coaches, we've got all the support in the world, and we just have some resistance, and we just do. So those things are good for you. I recommend you do those, but I will not sit here and be like, you should meditate every day, because I'm not meditating every day. So we're just not going to be we're going to be authentic about what we actually do. I do work with a mindset coach. So for me, you kind of have to know yourself. Some of you might be sitting there going like, how do you not journal and meditate? I would also be willing to guess that you are probably an introvert. Introverts tend to be better at going inward. Extroverts tend to be like it, as in it's more natural for us. Extroverts tend to be better at going outward. So I am an extrovert. I am a verbal processor. So I am very good at, like, if I'm talking with someone who I feel safe with, I will just word vomit all over them, which is probably very hard for them, which is why I work with coaches, right? It's like, I'll pay you to listen to me and get all this stuff up, but you have to have a space. So like your question was, yes, you have to have a safe space where you can get it out there, to have these things. I definitely recommend, even if you are a journaler or you do prefer to meditate and go inward, that's going to be a great way for you to get centered and get in touch with that very first question. What do I want? And I'll be honest, that's a hard question for me to answer, probably because I have fears around going inward. That's not as easy for me as going external with things, right? So it's an important part of the process, because if you don't know what you want, setting your 5-year goals is probably going to be challenging, or you might find yourself climbing a mountain that you actually don't want to see the view of the top of. You know, you might spend all your time and energy in your professional development climbing the wrong mountain. And if you do, that's okay. You get to start over. It's a beautiful life that we have, where we do have lots of choices. But the clearer you can get on that, the better. As far as tying this back into goals, though, Liz, I would say it's important to have humans also. Yeah. So whether those are coaches or an accountability partner or a mentor, I would find someone in your professional sphere. I don't think a spouse, this shouldn't be their role, because it can go down a negative path of just, it's too much professional in your personal relationship, but you need someone to hold you accountable. I don't know these stats off the top of my head, but they are insane. You guys can probably Google them and find them in about half a second. But about the difference between people who have goals and who don't, and people who write down their goals and who don't, and then people who share their goals with other and people who don't. And the most successful people do all of those things. They write their goals down and they share them with other people, like by a lot. Like the statistics really are incredibly overwhelming. So again, you guys are here listening because you want something more than you have right now. And that's awesome. Like, your life is going to be so much more fulfilling and interesting than people who are not interested in setting goals. But take the time to go inward and share externally with other people, and really set what those are so that you can be intentional. And then the last thing I would say that I do is, I said I was big on time blocking. I do create space throughout the week just to not be busy. Like, I don't like the word busy. I prefer to be much more intentional. I work part-time hours still to this day. But like on Mondays, I won't take calls with anybody who's not one of my team members. I typically don't work on Fridays unless it's something that just feels good to me. And so just don't overschedule yourself in your business and in your personal life. I think it's really easy in today's world. Well, today's world, we're not doing so much, but pre-March, right? It's easy to be like, I want my kids to be in every single activity, and every Saturday I'm driving around, whatever. We have a lot of boundaries around that. Like, each of our kids gets 2 activities at any given time ever. And one of those has to be something that nurtures them as a human, like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or whatever. Like, it has to be something like that. And so we don't spend all our times doing that. And so again, I think my final message that I would leave people with is that you have the capacity to be completely in control of your life. You just have to choose it and then accept everything that comes with that. So, and that includes controlling your time and achieving your goals.
I love it. That's, it's so helpful. And again, just such actionable tips that everyone can take with them today. I love that you said it's not just about setting times to be busy, but about setting times to not be busy. Our CEO Paige, actually, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me sharing, but every Thursday she tries as hard as she can to not take meetings, and she does a setback where, and how she gets centered is she writes in her journal, she asks herself these same questions about the business and personal goals and all that sort of stuff. And so I think that's a great reminder to don't just block off time to be busy, block off time to maybe not be busy. And and sometimes that's where the wheels, personally, I find that really start to turn.
Yes.
Is when you let your mind kind of be free a little bit. And I love that you said too, that what that exercise is for you to really sit back and think, it's different for other people. I'm the same. I'm an extrovert. And so if I'm not talking to someone, or if I'm not in like a very outgoing environment. I've tried to meditate as well. It's not my jam, but I'm a writer. So that's kind of my way to get things out, whether I'm like writing a fun fantasy script that I love, or I'm just blogging about something. That's my exercise.
Yeah,
So I think,
actual exercise for me is really big. So like this morning, my mind was going crazy because I went to a spin class and then I got in the shower. And my mind functions the best in the shower and when I'm driving. It's like the only time where I'm like really free without a child asking me for anything, to really think.
yeah.
And so I had them back to back, and all of a sudden I got out of the shower and I had to like send an email to myself before I forgot everything on my phone. I was like, blah, like 20 things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but again, you have to intentionally create that space, whatever that looks like for you. It will not just happen. In fact, I guarantee you that it will never happen. And so for those of you who are self-employed, we call this like working on your business instead of working in your business. But for everybody, you need that space, that breathing room to get centered and be able to answer some of these bigger questions so that you can start achieving your goals and start mapping backwards. It does not just happen on its own.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today. This was incredibly helpful. I cannot wait to share all of these tips with everyone listening. And if you guys are looking for people to connect with and hold yourself accountable now, like that's what these conferences are for. So feel free to drop your LinkedIn in the Facebook comment or the chat if you're watching via chat right now. Use this opportunity to find a peer network to hold yourself accountable and to start brainstorming what those exercises look like. But thank you so much. And again, this was just so great. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. Good luck, guys.